Hey everybody, welcome to episode, what is this, 27 now, I think? I think it's 27. If I'm wrong, you'll see on the little thing there, it'll say the actual number, but I think it's 27. Um, Anyways, in today's video, I am going to go over one of my biggest influences in art, and specifically with my, a person who inspired me to draw. Um, and this person is not a comic book artist, but sorry, I was going to say something else. But anyways, and I have one of his books that he had. It was a fantasy art technique. He's a fantasy artist. People who are in the know probably know who he is. Of course, that's Boris Vallejo, or as I used to say back in the day, Boris Vallejo. I really like that Boris Vallejo guy. So anyways, he's everybody probably knows who Frank Frazetta is, and Frank Frazetta also is one of my inspirations. However, I kind of found out about Boris first, and then kind of fell into the Frank Frazetta because a lot of times I didn't know. I thought kind of I didn't know who was doing the artwork at the time, and I thought it was kind of like the same guy. Ken Kelly is another guy who does like the Kiss album covers, and he did like the Micronauts box art. He's another guy that I kind of thought was the same guy, but obviously they're all mostly all inspired off of Frank Frazetta's stuff. They're not really clones per se, but they draw in a very similar style, and draw and paint. Most of the stuff that I'm talking about are his paintings, his fantasy art paintings, which were used as mostly book covers and magazine covers, but a lot of fantasy novels and science fiction novels used these Boris covers, especially in the 70s. They also got kind of associated with like the biker art, or like that kind of world too. So you'd see a lot of like custom gas tanks on like choppers and stuff back in the 70s. It would have Boris artwork on it. Sometimes it's poorly done, sometimes really nicely done. A lot of 70s custom Chevy vans in the 70s would have the full Boris or Frazetta paintings on the side of it, and Ken Kelly too. I think I've seen a van with the Kiss Destroyer album cover on the side of it. Back in my old neighborhood, a guy had a really cool, it was like a really flaming red Chevy van, almost like like a Dayglow red orange look to it, and it had a Boris painting on the side of it, and then wrapped around. I'm trying to think which painting it was. I know it was I can't remember which one it was actually, but I know on the back of it had, and I don't know if this was a Boris painting. There might have been a separate painting, but it's supposed to be the tail of the dragon or the monster they're fighting, kind of wrapped around in the spare tire case. Had a little dwarf wrapped up in the tail with an axe, fighting. Very Dungeons and Dragons-y, very fantasy, very 70s. I always just thought that was so cool. I mean, forever, it's like I wanted a custom 70s van with a cool Boris paint job on the side of it, or a Frazetta paint job. I think there's one for sale in like, I was in Vancouver. I saw online back, when I was on AOL, and they had it was a 6-wheeled van and had the Death Dealer, Frank's Frazetta Death Dealer painting on the side of it. Oh my God, they wanted like 12 grand for it, and this was probably 20 years ago. So I'm sure it's sold, and I'm sure it might not even exist anymore. Maybe that was pretty cool, but I so wanted one of those. I also wanted a chopper with a cool fantasy gas tank too as well. I just loved that whole time period, when that was a thing. I mean, I know like American choppers, and everybody kind of went chopper crazy there for a while in the 2000s, but back in the 70s it was really a thing, and it was cool. And I was like, oh, I want a chopper and a custom van and a Trans Am, and wanted a bunch of stuff back then. But anyways, let's go back to Boris Vallejo. So I got this book a while ago, not a long time ago, but probably 20 years ago. And I always wanted it. I just never could find it. and I was at a used bookstore, a Classic Books on Woodward in Royal Oak, Michigan. Woodward being one of the big strips coming out of Detroit. Classic Books was there, and he had a lot of cool stuff. And I was in there about, it might have been late 90s actually. I was there, and they had this book. I was like, oh, it's that book. It's that book I really wanted that I saw back at Rochester Book Center back in 1981, 82, right around that era. And it's like, oh, I'm going to get it. So I got it. I think it was like, usually pencils in the prices up here, but I think it was like $6 or $8 or whatever he wanted for it, which is kind of common fare. I mean, the cover was in better shape then, the slip cover. I kind of dinged it myself because I had it open a lot. And when I was in college and taking art classes, I used to use it a lot for just, not really inspiration, but just kind of like, I just always had it kind of open when I was doing stuff. But I did have some other books by him, but I sold them off. I had his photography book, Hindsights, which was a good one. I had Bodies. I had, there's one older book. It was like a collection. I think it was by Paper Tiger, I think was the publisher at the time. Paper Tiger did a lot of those art books, like Roger Dean art book. It did like Rodney Matthews art book. These are all fantasy painters. It also did like album covers and stuff. And back in the day, that's what people told me to get into. They said, "Oh, you shouldn't waste time with the comic book thing. You should be doing album covers." And that would have been cool, but I really didn't get into painting all that well. I mean, it's very expensive. It's very messy. It's very, living in a trailer. I did take a couple of oil painting classes when I was in college, and it was just, I don't know, it didn't take to me very much. I just wasn't big into it. It was hard. It wasn't really necessarily it was hard. It was just that it was too labor intensive. It required a lot of, if I had like a house, a dedicated room or basement, or had like a studio, especially like even like the studio at college, if I had that more of a thing, it would have been so better. But painting, at a trailer park, or painting at, in an apartment or whatever, I don't know. It's very hard to do. And like I said, maybe I'm just making excuses, but I just thought it was just difficult to really get into it. And I'm really impatient. And just you have to have a lot of patience with it. And I've painted things, and I've painted pictures. I mean, I've done image paintings too. But I don't know. I just never really got into it. So I would do, if I was to do album covers, which I thought about, I'll do more illustrative, and color them differently without paint. Maybe use gouache, or maybe use which is a kind of paint, but use more like the inks and stuff. But I never really got into it. I don't know. I probably, it might have been an avenue I could have went that direction, but I didn't really do that. So, but I've still loved his artwork. And like I said, I don't have any of his novels right now. It's not his novels, but novels featuring his art. He had a whole run of Gore novels, The Outlaw of Gore, Tarnsman of Gore by John Norman, those books. And I gave them, I didn't give them, I let an ex-girlfriend borrow them back in late, in 2000. And we broke up, and I never got them back. So I kind of lost those novels. And but they had all there's some of them are in this book too. Some of the covers had all those Boris covers. I would see his artwork on Heavy Metal magazine a lot. And I kind of discovered him right around the 81, 82 era, through the bookstore, because I would just go to the Rochester bookstore and I would stare at all the book covers, fantasy novels, science fiction novels, art books, just books in general. I would see it, like books like this. I would just see that art keep popping up, and I really took to it. I think I liked about it the hyperrealism, and obviously, even at a young age, I really liked his scantily clad women, and the hyperrealism to them. So the fantasy elements, of course, as well, too, dragons and all that other neat stuff that he put in it. But what this book is specifically, it's not really a collection of art, although it does have art, in it. It's a classic painting he did. I don't know how much I can flash of this and not YouTube bark at me here. So I'll try to keep it to the more tamer ones. That's a classic one. I think this was used on a might be a Pellucidar novel. I think it might have been a Pellucidar novel. Actually, no, he did. Yeah, he did some Pellucidar. But that was mostly Frazetta did the Pellucidar ones. The the Edgar Rice Burroughs books. But I'm just trying to see stuff. Yeah, some of these pretty classic on a lot of book covers. Yeah, it's a very distinct way of forming composition. I mean, essentially, here's a good example. You'd have a big monster, it's a giant spider in the background. You'd have a big monster or some kind of creature or something, and then you'd have a hero, usually a male guy, he's got his shirt off or something, showing his muscles. Everybody was muscle-bound, because Boris himself was a bodybuilder, and he'd often use himself as a reference. But he would, it would usually be some, hero in the foreground, and then sometimes you'd have a scantily clad girl, like, laying that he's, like, saving or protecting her from the monster. As it got along, he started doing a lot more female warriors and stuff where they didn't need protecting. They're fighting the monsters themselves. It was all basically what the market dictated at the time as far as the... I was hoping I don't get a... Okay, that one right there, that's the cover of that one art collection book that I never got. But I'm going to go to his and his wife's website here in a little bit, and I'll show you kind of what's on there. I figure I'd give them kudos, so you can go right to their website if you want to look at their stuff too. Give them some traffic. One thing this book though pointed out that I really thought was interesting, just at a young age, was how he would use photographic reference, to do his stuff, and he would usually photograph people. He said he used a lot of Polaroids, and he tried to use some dramatic lighting. I think that's him there specifically in the. And then he's talking about, in the whole book on photography and stuff, he's talking about when he got a Hasselblad camera and he started doing medium format camera, which he found the best to use for reference photographs. And, so he would also use in 35 millimeter. He would use pretty much anything he had. But he started to get into photography more and more, so stuff like, using that guy as a reference there. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. I was young. This is before I even got into comic books. I was like, so you can use so that's how you draw a horse. You look at a picture of a horse. Duh. How many people have horses in their backyard they can go run out and use and it's not like they hold still anyways. But yeah, he would take photographs, and he was really paying attention. Here's one of his line drawings. I love his painted work. And the same thing for Frazetta. I would rather look at these. I'd rather look at the pen and ink, like these proofs and stuff he would do. Like he would literally sketch the stuff in with ballpoint pen, or he would use other kind of pens. But I just liked because it was more comic booky, it was more graphic, and I liked that appealed to me. Even though I really liked the color of the paints and that hyper-realism. There's 3 different models here. So you got this big guy, you've got, this sorceress woman using her, this woman here, kind of like the princess or whatever, and then of course a monster, and of course a lot of the monsters he would use photographs for like muscles and stuff for all of the anatomy work, but made a lot of the stuff up, and it's did some cool monsters. I mean, it would be great if he would have done like some stuff for Dungeons and Dragons, but I don't think they could have afforded him at the time, because by the time D&D really got going, this stuff was some of his stuff, his commission work. He was getting a lot of money for his stuff. They ended up going with like Easley and those guys and Larry Elmore, which are great artists and inspirations to me as well. But I think that Boris was more established at this time, or too expensive. There's a good perfect example. So you've got this. This is the real painting, and obviously you can see the color and how much life it has. I'd love to see these in real life. And then here was he did like a pen and ink with a watercolor. This is the type of stuff more that I would be doing. But he did this type of thing, and then, used it as a proof. Sometimes they're underpaintings. No, it's different. It's not. It is different. And the characters are more, less photo referenced too. These are more like out of his imagination, so they got more of a comic book feel to it. Like I said, I prefer that stuff myself. Colored ink. So he's probably using Doc Martens. I prefer that to the painting. I mean, the paintings are amazing, you know, but I don't have that kind of skill to pull that off. I could do this, no problem, but this, no. But the other thing that's weird is, so his stuff's morphed over time. I mean, obviously you get older, your stuff changes. But he, specifically, and this is the same thing for like the box art for like the He-Man stuff, and a lot of, you know, fantasy art that was produced around that time. Because it was done with oils, and, you know, none of it was digital. Not that he does digital now, but everything has like a darkness to it and like a certain feel to it, which doesn't seem to be in his newer work. His newer stuff is too, the paint looks too crisp, or it's too lit, or it's too, something about it just doesn't have the same feel of this darker stuff. You know, I mean, especially when you use do the smoke and all that stuff with the colors and stuff. You know, all that older stuff just has a different look to it that I like better. You know, obviously the models and stuff he uses, like the hairstyles, are more of like a 70s, you know, 80s hairstyle in some of the models. But he didn't always use the hairstyle that was on the model. There's another good example of the ink drawing. Called Colored Ink Rough. And the name of this one's the Magnificent Tor. I think it was for Tor Publishing. I think that's why they did this for. And then, of course, obviously, you know, there's so much more in there. I mean, you guys can't see these very well on the camera, but, you know, classic one. This is from the movie, the album, or the movie poster for Amazons. And again, we get the same thing. You get the cool, you know, colored ink rough. So with on pencil sketch, and then the finished piece he'd used, and they would use that for the I think it was Amazons. So either Amazons or Barbarian Queen. I think this one was Amazons. No, it was Barbarian Queen, so it's right there. I know he did Amazons, Barbarian Queen 2. He did a bunch of the Deathstalker movie posters. But I loved I love those movies too. I mean, they're really bad movies, but they're bad in a good way, and you know, obviously featuring a lot of scantily clad women or naked women, and they always play a lot of those movies late on Cinemax, on cable. I'd watch a lot of them, and I'd tape them. And some of them I had like the VHS copies I found, you know, because I wanted the cover too. It wasn't just the movie, I wanted the cover. He did, as for European Vacation, there's a pencil sketch by him. So if you look at his pencil sketches, they're just amazing too. And there's the model that he used for the European Vacation movie poster. I think that's the final one he ended up going with there. But yeah, just the pencil sketches alone, you know, are just amazing as they're finished. Another thing that's cool is if you look over here, how well you can see that. But so he would lay he would put the pencil. He'd have the pencil stuff transferred to canvas, or sometimes he'd use masonite. Sometimes he'd use a canvas board, which is like a piece of canvas stretched over a thick piece of like X board. You have to buy it specifically like that. It's usually sometimes it's it's got gesso on it already, and sometimes not, which primes it with a white. But he has it transferred over there. I can't remember his process for transferring it on there. I think he might have used an opaque projector and just sketched it, but it's all really, I can't see he would go through that much work to re-pencil it on there. He had some kind of process. It says it in the book, I just forgot what his process was to transfer it over. And then he would just go nuts with with color. He would just use color swashes and go bananas. You know, sometimes even throwing an airbrush in there. Just these, you know, really nice washes of color to denote like kind of like a fantasy feel, like an otherworldly feel, you know, with clouds and smoke and fire and mist. And then and he'd leave enough of it, you know, he'd leave the light spot through, and then he'd go to town with the oils and he'd start rendering it in with oils. And I said, learning this stuff from this book was you know, it's like I had seen the stuff so many times, and actually I remember looking in the book. I didn't read it per se, but I did look through it as a kid in the 80s too. Before I got it, you know, I got it in the 90s, but I read it in the 80s. Not read it, but looked through it a lot, and I kind of grasped some of that stuff. It stuck in my head. There's a Red Sonja. But yeah, like I said, you know, well, I think it's from the Amber Chronicles. Roger Zelazny's Amber Chronicles. I've got those books, by the way. Not the ones with his covers, but I got the other ones. The Tor or Del Rey book. I can't remember who did the publishing of those. Got those. I read them. They're not. I don't know. They're kind of. I wasn't a huge fan of the writing style. It seemed very out there, and I don't know. The Amber stuff, people love it. I wasn't a huge fan of it. I much preferred like the Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff, or even the Robert E. Howard stuff, the Conan stuff, better to Amber. There you go. There's a heavy metal. That's a ink proof, or colored ink proof for a heavy metal cover, and I think he goes step by step. Yeah, painting for heavy metal. He showing his pencil sketches there, laying it into the board, doing the the crazy fiery color that would be the underlay, and it just kind of every step of the way until he does the final finished rendering on it. But yeah, like I said, stuff really spoke to me as a kid. Obviously, you're a young boy too, just going through the times when you're a teenager, seeing all these scantily clad girls too, didn't disappoint for the most part. It's a different world time back then, as far as kids today with the internet. We didn't have any of that back then, so we had stuff like this to kind of scratch that itch. But yeah, so man, time 20-some minutes. Okay, so yeah, Arco Publishing. I don't know what that sticker's for. I don't know if it's a barcode on the back from something. It's here. I was just wondering how much it cost. It's usually in the front inside cover, isn't it? Oh, see, they got it. I can barely see it. I want to say it looks like somebody scratched it out. Might have been given as a gift. I said it's a used copy. I found at a used bookstore. But a lot of the books I had too of those books. I mean, like remember I said I couldn't read very well when I was younger in the 80s. So all of my real heavy fantasy reading, I would say pretty much 99% of it was all done in the 90s. Elric books, Conan books, Edgar Rice Burroughs books, John Norman books. I just went nuts reading a lot of that stuff in the 90s because it was like I just woke up one day and I could just read. I just realized, hey, I can read. And then I just devoured everything that I could get my hands on. And I kind of went through a nostalgic kick even when I wasn't really that old, where I was just I was going to used bookstores everywhere. John King, downtown Detroit, used books classic books on Woodward. I'd find bookstores, Jelly Beans up kind of north where I'm at now. I would just go to all these used bookstores, be like just pilgrimages out to them, and I would just come home with just stacks of them. Because you get them for like $1, $2, 50 cents sometimes. Not in the best of condition, but I'd look for the ones in the best condition. But I mean, it was literally like I was a kid in the candy store. It's like all this stuff I had seen at Rochester Book Center, Fireside, when I was 10. I started seeing it, and it's like, oh, it's just cheap, So I was just, like I said, just armfuls of them. I've sold a lot of stuff off. Some stuff just went missing. Some stuff I lend people out and nobody gives it back. Seems to be a thing. And I learned all those stories, in my 20s. And like I said, that's when because in the 90s I was not really out of comics 100%, but comics weren't really a thing to me in my 20s and the 90s. I was more about the fantasy novels and reading the novels and stuff and doing that type of thing. Yeah, so Boris was a huge, anybody who knows me knows it's, oh, Tim, he loves that Boris, It was always a big thing. Again, I mean, I like Frazetta too, Ken Kelly, all those other guys. But Boris was the one that kind of spoke to me first. Most people, it's the other way around. But, yeah, so let's switch over. I'm going to go to his website here. He did the Aqua Teen Hunger Force. He's got this kind of, what do you call it, slideshow on his thing, but I'll go here. So it's called Julian Boris. So here's Boris here. I don't know how recent this picture is, but he's up there in age. He's still alive, I believe. I haven't heard of him passing. I mean, Frank Rosetta's passed. Wish it would stay on this. There's his wife, Julie. So they met. They were both in working out in gyms. She was a bodybuilder as well. And they kind of got to, and she was also into fantasy art and painting herself. They ended up getting married. Now, in that, though, one thing I got to say is, it's not because she's a woman, but I think that I think that might be Julie's piece there. I'm not a huge fan of her stuff. It's too feminine for me. I mean, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that in a personal, way. There's not enough masculinity in her stuff. It's too flowery. It's too girly, And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it just doesn't speak to me. Too many unicorns and butterflies and pretty girls and horses like that. Actually, it might be her too, as the model, because there she is there. But and then the thing is, when they got married, he kind of started to soften up on his more harder stuff. Not hard as in like pornographic, but I mean, he just harder. I mean, he has more a masculine hard edge. And again, it's all about their clients too. I mean, if the book publishers want him to do specific work for books that had more of a male voice, that was what he would do. He's a commercial artist, so it might not just be him. It might be just what the market dictated, the trend, what was trending at the time, what the publishers wanted, all of that stuff. But I think he got kind of away from himself, I find too, and not even in just like a feminine way. I think like he really got into stuff that interests him that just didn't interest me so much, and he kind of got away from that more darker, harder look that I liked. And like I think that's a Boris piece. You can usually tell they'll either work together, and you can tell she works by herself, you can tell, and then he works by himself, and you can tell usually. So let's go to it's just borisjulie.com if you want to go there. Let's go to his print store because it's a good way to look at their collection. And we're going to go specifically to, I'm going to go through Boris and I'm going to show you a little bit of Julie just to kind of show you what I'm talking about. Again, I mean no disrespect to them about it or to anybody who likes her work. I just personally don't like it as much, and I think it's because it's got too much of a female voice. And it just doesn't appeal to me. Let's see, let's go here. Let's go Boris prints. Let's go to paintings. Oh, I want to look at the drawings too. Let's go to paintings. So that's kind of what we're here for. Can you guys see this? Okay, yeah. And let's go back because these are probably newer. Okay, well, so here's an example. Is this a Boris? See, I don't know, but I don't know if it goes because that's an old piece there. That's in the book. Also, let's kind of go to ones that we can, not get in trouble with Amazon with. I know you can kind of see them here anyways, but I'm trying to find some of my personal. Oh, here's one of my personal favorites. I love the Dryad one. I love this. I like the three girls. I like the green. I love the green, like the trees. It's called the Dryads, and that's 91 by Boris, and it still has his harder look. But he really got into doing like the details and stuff and like the landscaping too, which he didn't do as much. I mean, he did it, but he didn't do it to this extent. But yeah, I really like this one. I guess that one had naked women on it, so it'll probably get demonetized, whatever. Well, I'm not even monetized yet, but when it does. So we got that one. We've got Or some of the other classic ones that are some of my favorites. Like I said, I don't think these are in order by like old to new. I think they're just kind of all over the place. Oh, that one's... So there was a book called... book series called the Bloodsong Trilogy, which I have somewhere here. I don't think I got rid of those. It's 3 books by this guy. I can't remember the name of it. I used to know the name of the author. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. That was the cover of the first book. I think that's Bloodsong herself, the character that's in the book. And again, I found those books just based, and they say you can't judge a book by its cover. That's true to some extent. However, I judged a lot of book by their cover. They had a cool cover. You know, it was part of why I liked the art. Let's see, let's go into some more here. I'm just trying to find some of my more classic. That one's in the book. We looked at that one because we saw the influences here. He did a bunch of Marvel stuff for a book called Titans. I think him and Julie both did those, and he did a lot of the Marvel women. Some of the guys too, yeah. But I just had I don't know. Her stuff was kind of his stuff you could tell was different, but even his stuff, I don't know. It was okay. It was okay. I mean, it wasn't great. I think like Joe Jusko does a lot better. If you want to look at painted Marvel characters and stuff, I think Jusko does a lot better job, or guys like that, guys who were the comic book artists that would also paint. One thing that's people have said about his art, and I don't disagree, is his stuff is very stiff, and I don't know if it's because of the way he's posing the models, is just overall composition. I would say probably a combination of all of that. But his stuff does seem to be very stiff. If you look at Frazetta's stuff's a lot of motion. And it's almost like Jack Kirby art. I mean, it looked like the stuff was going to leap off the page. He doesn't do much of that. I think it's because he is... I mean, Frazetta would also do a lot more without reference. And Boris, primarily, he's always reference. And when he does it, I think some of the models are either stiff or, you know, he's not directing the models to be more dynamic. But the thing is, I mean, you can only do so much. I mean, you gotta, you know, unless you've got, like, you put them on strings or something, or catch them, you know, do action shots. It's hard to pose models crisp and clear with no motion blur. You have to have a pretty nice, like, almost like a camera set up for, you know, doing sporting events. Like, if you look at, like, you know, Sports Illustrated, they'll have a shot of, you know, a guy blocking a kick or some guy, you know, football player. It's a lot of motion, and it's crisp, and it's caught, that instance is caught in time. So you could do it. It's just I don't know if he was set up to do that or knew how to do that. Like I said, he was working a lot from Polaroids. Let's see what else we got here. And these aren't... This is just everything he has prints of. He doesn't have everything. Or does it go farther back? It's got a little arrow. I just want to see how far back it goes. Okay, so I gotta go to 9. No, it ends at page 9. Okay, so let's look at his pencil drawings real quick. I'm assuming they're pencil drawings. Well, probably ink drawings too. So like... Yeah, I wasn't a fan of the butterflies. I understand why they're doing the butterfly stuff, because the wings look cool. But yeah, so I used to have the sketchbook. I don't have it anymore too. And it was both of them. It was Boris and Julie, their sketchbook, and they had a lot of the stuff was in the sketchbook, and it was really amazing looking at it. I was trying to find some of the sketches for the older stuff. Yeah, it's an older sketch. But, yeah, so there's that. Now, let's just, out of contrast, let's just look at Julie's stuff. Let's look at her paintings. Yeah, it's just, it's got too, yeah. She does a lot of animals and stuff, which, you know, that doesn't really appeal to me much either. And not that I don't like animals, it's just animal art doesn't really do much for me. as much as Mr. Dodson would take offense to that, seeing that my art teacher from high school, he used to paint stamps as a side business. He'd do these elaborately well-rendered paintings of ducks in his stamps. So we have Mr. Dodson and his ducks. But they did nothing for. I thought they were amazing when I saw them. I mean, I was watching them. He'd do them in class sometimes. It was just amazing to watch. But at the same time, it did nothing for me. I mean, it inspired me to get better, but that's about it. That's a classic painting, the one I just showed you of Julie. I used to get their calendars every year too, like in the late '90s into the early 2000s. Sometimes people just give them to me as gifts because they knew I liked that art. And she does a lot of animals. She loves her animals, wolves and bears and lions and tigers. Oh my! I know she does. She does have about 3 paintings that I actually do really like. I'm just trying to find one of them here. There's Lady Death, as far as comic book characters. I think that's good. I think when she's doing something that appeals to me, like Lady Death appeals to me, I think her art is better. But when she gets self-indulgent, she kind of loses me. Well, she doesn't she does lose me. But I think when she's doing something for, again, it's all doing for something for a client. Client wants you to do specific work. It's going to garner different results. This looks familiar. The model caught my attention, like their look. It's not all that caught my attention, but anyways, let's see. I'm not seeing the painting. She's got a couple of them. I know one of them I had in one of the calendars, and I ended up, after the year was over, I ended up saving the calendar and cutting them up. I know that's a heavy metal album cover, because I had that heavy metal album cover. I remember specifically when I got that heavy metal issue too. I bought a pizza that day. I rented, what was the movie I rented? Bad Channels, with a soundtrack by Blue Oyster Cult. I got a pizza, rented Bad Channels, and I bought that heavy metal all in a Friday. And then my mom was going away with her boyfriend for the weekend, and I had the whole weekend myself, so I had to set myself up with some stuff to do. And I need to watch Bad Channels again. I saw in my vinyl hunting, I saw the Bad Channels soundtrack on vinyl. I was going to pick it up because I love Blue Oyster Cult. I'm going to get into my music stuff at some time, because like I said, my music stuff does go hand in hand with a lot of this stuff. A lot of my similar tastes in art also bleed over into music in a sonic way. You probably know what I'm talking about. I'm very fantasy and very that type of thing. Heavy metal, progressive rock, all that kind of stuff. Long 20-minute epics. I don't see that piece. That's weird. She doesn't have a print of it. These are her prints, and doesn't have a print of it. It's not really anything crazy. They had a model that they both used, and I really was attracted to the model. She had like a gymnast's body, crazy legs on her, and she had a really cute, like very youthful face that I really liked on her. And I don't even see any of the other paintings when they use that model. And I don't know if that's her. This isn't the painting I'm talking about, but that kind of looks like her face. That might be the model, I'm not sure. You never know, until you... See, Julie would use... Boris would use his wife, she had a body like that. She's a bodybuilder. And she had long blonde hair. Her hair's white now. She's older. She's probably in her mid-60s. Boris is probably pushing 80, if not 80 by now, I would think. He's still alive, though. I haven't heard of him. I haven't woken up and checked, the internet and say, oh, Boris Vallejo has passed away. I haven't heard that yet, so they're still going. Like I said, I haven't really been... That's a heavy metal cover right there. I haven't really been into their newer stuff that much. kind of, it's not that I might have talked about this in another video. I haven't really lost interest in his artwork or this type of artwork. I just, I know that was in the calendar. I think that's her. This is the model. This isn't the painting I'm talking about, although I like this one too. This model, she's got like a specific face that I really liked, you know, and you can't see her, I mean, you can kind of see her leg there, but when she's standing more, you know, kind of flexing her legs, she's got insane leg muscles. And I obviously know by now that I'm a below the waist kind of person, so when I see that type of stuff, it instantly registers in my brain. Don't see it. I don't know why you didn't have a print of it. That's weird. But regardless, the painting it's not really super crazy. She's standing there. She's standing from the side angle. She's got her hand on something like a staff, and there's like a little dragon kind of creature with like little glasses on, the like gremlin-looking guys standing by her, and they're standing on just a you know, a color swath of organic whatever that is, and then and on the crazy background, I think there's like a chrome like futuristic city in the background. Back into her. But maybe it was Boris. I thought it was Julie that did it though. Or they might have done it together. Don't they have a Julie and Boris section? I don't want to go too crazy here, but I also want to check out these originals real quick. So these originals, I wonder what these are going for. Does it even have prices on here? That's not insane. $8,000? That's crazy though. I mean, you think about, you know, Boris just sold a painting for like $8 million. Not Boris, Frank Frazetta's family, because he's passed away, but they sold a painting, and I don't know if it was the family who sold it or a private dealer, but they sold a painting for like $8 million. I mean, he is like the grandfather of all of this type of artwork. But Boris is pretty well known in that circle as well. Again, some people think his stuff's dislike it in comparison, but $10,000 for this one. I mean, it's a lot of money. I mean, there's no way I'd ever have this kind. Even if I had this money, I probably wouldn't buy this stuff. I don't know. If I was stupid rich, I would probably buy the $10,000 ones, because I could just sit there and look at the art. Especially if it was a painting I really liked, I could just sit there and stare at it for hours, look at the detail in it. But I don't know if you guys, I mean, obviously, if you're into art, you know what I'm talking about. But even when it comes to comic book art, if you see a page of traditional art and you just look at the inks, I mean, it's amazing. It just really, really is enjoyable to look at a close-up, scrutinize it, which I do. You know, I scrutinize it real deep. Yeah, so these aren't crazy expensive, you know. I mean, they're expensive, but they're not $8 million expensive. So if I had $8 million, I would probably buy myself 2 or 3 of these and, you know, put them in my house. The other thing, it's like when you spend a lot of money on art, I mean, I obviously got to take care of this stuff, and, you know, I got action figures, which are nowhere near albums and stuff, and I've got some art on the walls, or even posters and stuff. I would be afraid to have this stuff, because it would just be like, you'd have to be cleaning it constantly, you know, keeping dust off of it, and, you know, I'd just be, you know, paranoid that I wouldn't be handling it well, and, you know, over time it would deteriorate. I mean, I know obviously paintings have lasted, you know, the dawn of history. I mean, the dawn of history, but, you know, old paintings in museums. But those are professional people that know how to curate that stuff. So they probably could, you know, if you neglected something like that, I'm sure a professional could restore it back to, you know, its former glory. But I would just be paranoid about that. I would be very like, oh, how do I mean, a piece of comic book artwork is easy. I mean, you can put it in sleeves, you can put it in plastic, you know, have it encased or whatever, you know, and it would archive it pretty well. But these paintings and stuff, how fragile they are, I would just be paranoid. All right, so yeah, let's go running towards the end here. So yeah, go ahead and take a look at his art and her art too. You know, if you like that more, like I said, it's his stuff has got more of a obviously he's got more of a male voice, and his stuff has more of a female voice, you know. And I have a tendency to prefer the stuff with more of a male voice than the female stuff. But again, I can totally respect it. I mean, I think she's amazing. You know, I can't possibly even come close to doing any of that stuff that she does. So, you know, I have nothing but respect. Just, it's not my cup of tea. And it's, you know, because, you know, who she is. That's not also to say that, you know, men and women can also, you know, paint or create with you know, men creating with a female voice, female creating with a men's voice. You know, that happens. You know, everybody's different, but by and large, you know, so the same thing that happens with the writers. Like if you read a lot of fantasy, and you can really tell stuff that is written by women, it just has a female voice to it, and stuff that's written by, you know, men has a male voice to it. I prefer, and you know, times are changing too. I mean, you know, socially everything's changing, and you know, culturally everything's changing, but you know, certain times and stuff. I mean, the stuff that really speaks to me, it was created, I would say a lot of stuff was created in the past. You know, same thing with comics too. I think stuff in like the 60s and 70s, specifically the 70s, seems to really speak to me a lot. You know, I mean, obviously there's Tolkien, and there's, you know, even Robert E. Howard, you know, lived the turn of the century people. You know, that was way back then. But, you know, a lot of the stuff got popularized, and a lot of this stuff came from the 70s. It got real big in the 70s. You know, fantasy art and fantasy novels and stuff weren't super popular in the 50s and 60s. It was the 70s. The 70s with, like, rock culture, biker culture, hot rod culture, you know, just that whole time period, you know, that stuff kind of speaks to me more. And then as it bled into the 80s, but I would say by mid-80s and towards the later 80s, everything started to change. And I didn't like it as much. So, I mean, I'll probably get into that more. It's hard for me to articulate, too, because I know what I'm talking about, but it's hard for me to put into words. You might know what I'm talking about. But we'll explore that ideology, I guess, as we go, as we look at a lot of this stuff, you know, into all the interests and stuff that I have. But let's close this one up. Tomorrow, again, I don't know. I usually don't know what I'm going to do till about 5-10 minutes before I do it. And I was looking at my bookshelf, and I saw my book on there, and I went, oh, hey, Boris. Maybe I mean, I talked about Dungeons & Dragons. I've talked about Marvel Comics. I've talked about toys. I've talked, you know, I haven't got into music yet, but I've talked about, and I've touched on artwork with like Larry Elmore and stuff. So I thought, oh, well, let's get into one of the major artists that really influenced me, and this was one of them. So, you know, so, all right, I will catch you tomorrow's, and we'll figure out what we're going to do from there. Again, just to keep reminding everybody, I'm going to be gone from the 16th to the 22nd. On vacation, so I won't be posting anything because I don't have the capacity to do so. I don't have a laptop. And I also won't be around to do any of my own work too, so for those people who are, you know, followers of my work, they also know that I'm going to be out of the studio, which is my bedroom. I'm sitting at my workstation. There's my Wacom's right here. So this is where I do all my work. And I'll be away from here for a week, going on vacation with my son and my sister. So I will catch you guys later, and we'll see what's going to happen tomorrow. All right, talk to you then. Bye-bye.